The world of things being free has become so commonplace, particularly for consumers, but also in enterprise. And there's lots of reasons why this happened. Many ad-based businesses online, much need for velocity and customer growth. So you just get them to try the stuff and get to using it, and that velocity helps build your product. Or perhaps it's an ad-based business, but we're also moving to free and enterprise, and it can't be a strictly ad-based business. This is evolving. In the next however many 15 minutes, we're going to try and sort through a little bit of this. I'd like you to solve all the problems in the world by saying who you are and what your company does and what you're learning about the world of free.
So I am Amy Pressman. I am the president and co-founder of Medallia. We are an enterprise software company in the customer experience management space. We're actually named number 7 on Forbes' top 100 private SaaS companies this past year. And we have actually never had a freemium model, but we've replicated some parts of the advantages of freemium with our pricing model.
Now, what are the advantages in your view?
Of freemium?
Yeah.
I think what you really want to do is drive adoption, really quick adoption. And so we worked on a pricing model that allows us to get as many users using our product as much as possible without actually selling it for free.
But you did want them to have the experience of handing over a little bit of cash to begin with.
That's right.
So you didn't have to make that.
We were bootstrapped for 10 years, so that was a little bit important.
The bootstrapping part was important.
I'm Edith Harbaugh. I'm CEO and co-founder of LaunchDarkly. We help software companies all over the world launch and control their own features. So one thing we do for other companies is actually to manage their own different subscription levels.
Right.
So prior to LaunchDarkly, I was product at TripIt, which was one of the biggest freemium travel apps. We had over 10 million free users, and then we monetized via our premium services.
Okay. And in the case of TripIt, why was it free to begin with?
You know, so I thought a lot about this. TripIt worked very well because it was something that had a very low bar to adoption and something where our own costs were pretty low and where there was a pretty large addressable market. So, you know, everybody here at Web Summit traveled here,
right,
even if it was just to take a taxi or walk. So there's millions of travelers worldwide that we could have a product that if it was easy for them to use, they would just adopt.
Right. Now, in these cases, for something like a TripIt, you want to show a lot of growth because you might have investors. You were bootstrapped, so that wasn't an issue. But you want to show growth, or you want to build up a network effect, or you want people used to your style of experience.
We looked at the free users as a marketing expense, basically.
Right.
So we relentlessly focused on our Net Promoter Score, which is just basically how likely one person is to recommend to another.
Right.
So of the 10 million users, we knew that people would tell somebody else and tell somebody else, and that in this chain, a certain percentage of them would convert to the premium.
Right.
So it was not just out of the goodness of our hearts, though we are good.
I'm sure you're fantastic people, but
there
was value in giving it away.
There was value in getting this huge base of free users big enough that we could get a certain percentage of premium users.
And you also learn about the experience you're delivering that way. It might be the NPS, or it might be ease of use and adaptability. But Amy, is this just try before you buy, an age-old thing, or is there something new going on with freemium?
You know, I think it's a little bit of both. I think in reality it is try before you buy, because ultimately these companies have to make money. They have to have an upgrade option that delivers enough value to customers that customers will be willing to pay. But I think what makes it look a little bit different is the velocity is so fast in the beginning that it almost feels like this may be a new business model. I will say that, you know, we are kind of one of the unicorns, and a number of other of the unicorns did use a freemium model extraordinarily effectively, but they seem to hit a ceiling in the $20 to $50 million range.
20 to 50 million in revenue.
In revenue.
Right.
And what they realized, one of the reasons that this freemium model worked so well is that these companies had almost perfect product market fit with the initial target market they were going after. Once you exhaust that market, then you have to turn to, you know, more traditional go-to-market activities. You need to bring in real sales and marketing to get through that 20 to 50 million revenue.
Well, if you're a unicorn and you're at 20 million, something's wrong with this picture, because I don't know how your valuation's going to stay over $1 billion. You've got to cross a rather substantial chasm to justify that valuation.
Yep.
And what is it that has to take place there? And can free still exist beyond those revenue levels?
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, what we've seen with some of our peers is ultimately them going to much more traditional sales and marketing as they get larger.
Right, and there are several kinds of free. I mean, you mentioned some there, but then there are also the free of open source companies that hope to go public as well. And Cloudera has done this successfully. There are MongoDB. You know, there are various free open source things, and that's free for some of the software, perhaps all of the software, but there are levels above involving dashboards or service levels. Is that still a freemium model in your view?
I think I'd like to touch back for a second on the try before you buy. So like Algolia, the CEO was telling me they have, so their search as a service.
Right.
And so they have this really long tail of developers out there who like to kind of try it on their side projects.
Right.
So, you know, they try it on their side projects, they get comfortable with it, and then they're bringing it into the enterprise.
Right.
So he's happy to keep supporting these hobbyists. There's other, however, projects or products.
And that is akin to open source in a way, which is usually done in the margins of the business. Certain ITs or developer guys will bring it in.
Yeah, I'd say there's other products, and I'd put LaunchDarkly in this category, honestly, of you're a key part of infrastructure, and you're not something that's just going to kind of dabble with as a hobbyist. You're going to choose to use us because you're going to run your business processes off of us.
And then what is the event that can compel people to start paying money? In your case, you wanted them to pay initially, so it wasn't psychically such a big move, but is it that you're leveling to someone else in the organization who in some ways would prefer to pay money because that has ownership and liability issues or managerial insights? Jump ball.
I mean, I think that there are a number of different models. I think the key is whatever is going to trigger people actually purchasing has to be real value for that customer. So sometimes it's capacity-based, you get a certain amount free, and then over that, sometimes it's time-based, you get like 30 days, you get to try it. Sometimes it's even use case. So there are some companies, I think like Adobe, that will give it free to non-commercial, kind of nonprofit. But there's always, but that flip has to be something that is true value, otherwise you risk killing or deferring revenue.
I will say there's a lot of really interesting things that after people start paying, there's this thing called the Endowment Effect that you're actually more likely to keep using it.
Right.
So basically, we did a lot of pricing tests at TripIt, and like people who had paid were actually much happier.
Really?
Because they associated value with the product. And I'd say if something is too free or too cheap, people kind of think it's disposable.
Yep.
Right, they walk away from the experience. They are literally not invested.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the App Store, you know, out of the apps that are downloaded, I think like 40% are never even opened once.
Wow.
Now, does there arise some sense of changing the brand or the experience as you go over to paid, do you think? Do you need to sort of have in mind as you start, this is free, but eventually you will have to pay, and here's how?
I think it's really important to set expectations there. I know free users are interesting because they sometimes feel just as invested. Like they're like, well, I've been using you for 7 years, even though I've not paid you anything.
Right.
So you have to be really clear about, okay, these are free features, these are paid. And I think most people are pretty understanding. They recognize that if you're not making money, somehow you're going to go out of business.
And they don't want that.
Yeah.
So I was thinking part of your question was about the branding. I think part of what I've seen happening with some of the peers I see in Silicon Valley is that freemium model. Like basically it allows for this explosion of love for that software. So you don't, I would think you would want to hang on to that brand. I haven't seen a change in brand that you just need to now layer on additional value that makes paying for it seem obvious. But you've already created love for the brand. That's why it's been so viral. So I wouldn't want to walk away from that brand. I'm not sure if that was the question you're asking, but
it's a good answer even if it isn't the question, so I'll take it. Now, in your case, if you were to start anew and you didn't have to bootstrap, what part of the business might you make free? Or would you still want to charge right from the start?
We would have to have a very different business model to be able to. I'm thinking about. We would need to change our business model somewhat to be able to do a true freemium model.
Certain metrics, certain insights you could give away?
There are certain parts of our business, such as that are easier to get started with, but we tend to sell not at the individual level, and I think this freemium works really well when you can go into individuals. We tend to sell at least a department level, a division level, a geography versus the individual.
Do you share that view that this is really for individuals to pick up and bring in? They're getting it free in order to be ambassadors to the company.
Yeah, I mean, so at TripIt I started our TripIt for Teams, and I looked at all of our free users as basically a way that we could get people very excited and very much in love with TripIt, and then have them upgrade to something that was for an entire business. It's very hard, though, with some products to just give it away for free if you have any sort of cost of goods associated with it, if you have high support costs. If this addressable market for your company is perhaps only 30 companies worldwide, it's just very hard to make enough money sometimes to justify a free model.
Now, Amy, you service a number of companies and you have a number of competitors, as you say, who do use some sort of freemium model. What are the hazards typically you see them encounter? You mentioned the limits of 20 million to 50 million. Mm-hmm. Are there other things in terms of targeting? It sounds like you're both saying, before you choose free, think about the market you're trying to address more than anything and create an expectation inside that. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's commonly done inside most companies?
That people think about...
Yeah, do they make that step?
About thinking about the target market? Yeah, I think so. You were asking what were the hazards. I think one I mentioned is, that there may not be enough revenue if you are not good at figuring out what your ultimate market will be. Another one is you will devalue the core service, what you were talking about. And another one is it's just easier to churn. Retention rates when you become really a growing and revenue-generating company become really, really important, especially in enterprise software. So you want to have high retention rates.
Yeah, I'd say even more. I mentor a fair amount of startups in San Francisco. Sometimes giving away your product for free does not make anybody like it any much more.
Right.
Like a lot of startups just fail because there's no market for it, even at any price. Because there's an adoption curve of using a new product. So if nobody wants to use it, even if it's free...
That may be actually the information.
Yeah.
Like, this company shouldn't exist.
Right.
That's harsh, but that's a reality.
Or pivot.
Yeah.
Yeah, or pivot.
Yeah. That's it. We should figure out a thing we can sell and then give it away so that we get to sales eventually.
Or even reverse that, nobody wants it, even if there's other costs associated with a business using a product rather than just the price.
Right.
There's the installation time, there's the training time, there's all these other costs to get it started to use it. So free, the price is just one cost of a business.
And this is a subset of one of these enormous changes that's happened by selling so many goods and services online, and that is that the traditional sort of, awareness, education, sales, aftercare spectrum doesn't have hard and fast divisions, even though there may be groups like that.
Yeah.
It's much more continuous.
We've found a 30-day free trial to be very helpful for us because people use our product, they see that it's easy to use, and then they show up basically having self-educated.
Right.
Right. Like we'll get a request like, hey, I want to buy today.
Right. And you can move from a kind of mass treatment to something higher touch that I think people would come to expect as they pay more.
Yeah, I think we are all very lucky to be in this SaaS world now. I remember pre-SaaS, where you would have to send sales engineers on site.
Right.
And make sure that it worked with Oracle and your WebLogic app server.
I have some brochures.
And so you'd have these huge long sales cycles that didn't really serve the customer or the vendor because both are why does this take so long?
Right.
With SaaS, you can literally log in and have something going within 5 seconds. At TripIt, we called it the 5 seconds to delight. Because you could just get people in using your products.
And obtaining that behavior is so valuable for the sale and for the aftercare because you can see what to develop, you can see what they may like.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of software as a service because then also like you could continue to delight the customer because you don't have to wait for them to install a new version. You could keep pushing out new features. You could keep trying new stuff continually.
That's the insight in a way that now we say, in some ways, you know, I'm launching this, have this experience with me. And at some point, yeah, money should exchange hands, and I will care for you. And like, we may be at a chatbot level now, and at a human-to-human level. The value is reflected in the treatment you're getting.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in business for about 3.5 years, and the cool thing is how excited our customers are about how much we've grown.
Wow. Well, that's great. So for the room, a couple of closing thoughts. How should they think about freemium? How would you address the market now, both of you?
Go ahead.
Yeah, you first.
I think a freemium has been a really good model for a number of enterprise SaaS companies. We did not use it, and we were equally successful. So if you can find a way not to go freemium, I personally have had a good experience with that, but it's certainly, if you can benefit from very quick adoption using freemium, it's worth considering.
Yeah, I'd agree with Amy. Freemium is valuable if you have a very large addressable market and something that can be very quickly adopted, and then somehow you've preserved a layer on top of that that you could sell.
It's still okay to talk about money. Well, it's very bright up here. We can't see your faces, but you can see ours. I hope we run into you on the floor around here. If you have any more questions, we can approach them one-on-one. Got to move on. Thank you very much.